Hey everyone. My name is Elena Parker, and this is not an easy story to tell, but it's mine. Before I begin, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because what I'm about to share isn't just my story, it might be yours too. The day my mother said, "You're not my daughter anymore," something inside me broke. And the worst part? She meant it. No hesitation, no tears in her voice. Just cold, final words that sliced through everything we ever were. You know how people say mothers can never hate their children? I used to believe that. Until the day she looked at me like I was a stranger in her house. A mistake she wished she'd never made. It happened in the kitchen. Just another evening, just another argument. The air smelled of burnt toast and tension. I remember standing there, my hand shaking, holding a coffee mug that wasn't even mine. She was across the counter, arms crossed, that same disappointed look that I'd seen 100 times before. "You think you can just walk away from everything I taught you?" she said, her voice sharp, clipped every syllable like a slap. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come out right. They never did with her. I tried to explain that I just wanted to live my life differently. To make choices she didn't agree with, sure, but they were my choices. But she didn't hear that. She never did. To her, my independence sounded like rebellion. My dreams sounded like betrayal. She said it so suddenly, I almost laughed because it didn't sound real. "You're not my daughter anymore." I thought maybe she was angry, maybe she'd take it back in a minute. But she didn't. She just turned away and started washing the dishes. Like I was gone. Like I had never existed in her world. And I stood there frozen. Not crying, not yelling. Just empty. I remember my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the water running in the sink. My hands were cold. My throat hurt. I wanted to scream, to beg her to stop, but I didn't. I just left. Outside, it was raining. I didn't even have a jacket. I remember thinking, how stupid, that I should have at least grabbed my phone charger. But I didn't care. I just walked. Past the mailbox, past the streetlight, past everything that felt like home but wasn't anymore. And as I walked, her words echoed. Over and over. "You're not my daughter anymore." At first it sounded like punishment. Then it started to sound like truth. Because maybe I wasn't the daughter she wanted. Maybe I never was. People always ask, what does heartbreak feel like? I think it feels like this. Not when someone you love leaves you, but when someone you love decides you don't exist to them anymore. And the worst part? You still love them anyway. That night I stayed at a friend's place. I didn't tell them what happened. I just said, we had a fight, but inside, I knew it wasn't just a fight. It was an ending. The kind that doesn't come with an apology the next morning. I didn't go back home after that night. I couldn't, because sometimes silence hurts more than words. And my mother's silence that night was louder than her shouting had ever been. In the next part, I'll tell you what came before that moment, the years that built the distance between us, piece by piece. If you've ever had a relationship that cracked slowly before it broke, you'll understand. So don't forget to like this video. Subscribe for the next chapter and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been told something that changed you forever? Before everything fell apart, before those words were ever said, there was us. A mother and a daughter who used to laugh in the kitchen, who used to sing along to old ABBA songs while baking on Sunday afternoons. It's funny, you never realize you're living in your good old days until they're gone. When I think back now, I can still smell the vanilla cake she used to bake on my birthdays. I can still see her hands, small, always busy, brushing my hair before school. She was strict, yes, but back then it felt like love wrapped in rules. My mom wanted everything in order. The house, the grades, the people we talked to, all had to be just right. She believed the world was cruel, and the only way to survive was to control everything. Especially me. When I was 10, she told me, "Elena, you have to be the girl people talk about with respect, not with pity." I didn't understand what she meant back then. I just wanted to climb trees, mess up my hair, and come home covered in mud. But she'd stand there at the door with that disappointed look, hands on her hips, towel in one hand, love in the other. And she'd say, "You're my daughter. Don't forget that." I didn't know those words would one day sound like a curse. High school was when things started to shift. I wanted to write, to create stories, to explore. She wanted me to study law. "It's stable, it's safe, it's respectable," she'd say. And I'd nod, because arguing with her felt like trying to win against the wind. Every time I'd mention something creative, painting, poetry, theater, she'd smile politely and change the subject. Or worse, she'd say, "That's nice, honey, but dreams don't pay bills." And every time she said it, something inside me dimmed a little more. I started lying to her, small lies at first. Saying I was going to the library when I was really at a poetry reading. Saying I was studying with friends when I was actually writing in a coffee shop. I wasn't proud of it, but it was the only way to breathe. It's strange how distance doesn't always begin with a fight. Sometimes it begins with a moment of silence that lasts a little too long. We stopped talking like we used to. Breakfast became quiet. Dinners felt like interviews. Her eyes started to look through me instead of at me. She'd ask, "How was school?" I'd say, "Fine." She'd nod. That was it. Just fine. That word became our relationship. Fine, not good, not bad. Just fine. I don't blame her entirely. She grew up in a different time, a different world. One where love meant discipline and kindness was shown through sacrifice, not soft words. She didn't know how to say, "I'm proud of you." She only knew how to say, "You can do better." I still remember the first time I ever raised my voice at her. I was 17. She found my journal, pages and pages of poems and stories. She read them without asking. When I walked in, she was standing there with the book in her hands, tears in her eyes. I thought maybe she'd say something like, "I didn't know you wrote so well." But instead, she said, "These are full of nonsense. You wrote about leaving home, about hating your mother. Is that what you really think of me?" I tried to tell her. It was fiction, just words, just feelings on paper. But she didn't want to hear it. To her, it was betrayal. "You're writing like I'm the villain in your life," she said. And maybe she was, but not the kind of villain who enjoys hurting you. The kind who hurts you because she thinks it's the only way you'll learn. That night, I heard her cry in her room. I stood by her door but didn't knock. And that was the beginning of the end. Not the big explosion you'd expect, just a slow, steady quiet that never went away. When people ask me what went wrong between us, I never know where to start. It wasn't one fight or one decision. It was 1,000 tiny moments, unspoken words, misunderstood love, and that wall we both built brick by brick by the time I realized how tall it had become. We were already standing on opposite sides. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about the choice that finally broke us. The decision that made her say those words she could never take back. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story if it touched something inside you, because sometimes just knowing someone else understands can make all the difference. Tell me in the comments, did you ever lose someone even when they were still there? They say relationships don't break in a single moment. They fade like paint left too long in the sun. With me and my mom, that fading started quietly. No screaming, no slammed doors. Just distance. The kind that sneaks in while you're pretending everything's fine. By the time I turned 18, I had mastered the art of silence. I could sit at the dinner table, nod at her questions, and make it through an entire meal without a single spark of emotion. We were living in the same house, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum, beautiful but cold. It began with the little things. I stopped telling her when I was going out. She stopped asking how my day was. She used to wait up for me when I was younger. But now the lights in her room were always off when I came back. Sometimes I'd stand outside her door, listening for any sound, a snore, a sigh, something to tell me she was still awake, still there. But there was only silence. And then came the judgment, small, sharp, constant. "You've gained weight. Your friends don't seem serious. Why are you wasting your time on that?" It wasn't cruelty, I know that now. It was fear, her way of trying to keep me in the world she understood. But at 18, fear sounds a lot like control. The first real fight wasn't even about something big. I'd come home late from an art exhibit, something my friend Mia had begged me to attend. Mom was waiting in the living room. Lights dim, her arms crossed. That silence before she spoke, I swear, it was louder than thunder. Do you enjoy worrying me, Elena? She said, do you like making me feel like I failed as a mother? I remember staring at her, speechless. She wasn't angry that I was late. She was angry that I was changing. That I was building a life that didn't revolve around her anymore. I said something I shouldn't have. I said, you don't know me. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. And I saw her face fall, like I'd slapped her. She didn't yell. She just said, that's what you think of me. Ownership. And then she walked away. That night I heard her crying again. But this time I didn't stand outside her door. I stayed in my room pretending not to hear. That's how pride works. It feels powerful for 5 minutes, then it eats you alive. After that, every conversation turned into a debate. She'd talk about responsibility, stability, the real world. I'd talk about freedom, art, and passion. We were speaking 2 different languages, but both convinced we were right. One evening, she found a flyer in my bag. A scholarship offer for an art school in another city. She stared at it for a long time before saying, so you were planning to leave? I said, it's just an opportunity, Mom. And she said, no, it's an escape. That word hit me hard because she was right. I was trying to escape, not from her, but from the version of myself she wanted me to be. I didn't want to be the perfect daughter anymore. I wanted to be me, even if she didn't like who that was. From that point, things got worse. Short texts instead of conversations. Dinner's in the fridge. Don't be late. Simple sentences that used to sound like care now sounded like commands. And I started staying out longer, working part-time, hanging with people who made me feel understood. But no matter how late I stayed out, part of me still waited for her message. Just one text saying, be safe. It never came. She had stopped waiting. And maybe that's when I realized she was letting go too, just in her own way. I thought she was punishing me with silence. Maybe she was protecting herself from the daughter who was already halfway out the door. Looking back, I think that's when the love between us started to rot from the inside, not because we stopped caring, but because neither of us knew how to say, I'm scared of losing you. And the next thing I did, the choice I made, would push her past the point of no return. You never know which decision will change everything. You just make it, thinking it's one small step, and then the whole world shifts beneath you. For me, that moment came one gray afternoon in late October. The air was cold, and the trees outside our house were losing their last bits of color. The kind of day that feels like something's ending. I didn't know it yet, but something was. The art school I'd applied to secretly emailed me that morning. I'd gotten in. Full scholarship. It was everything I dreamed of, a chance to start over, to study what I loved, to finally breathe. But there was one problem. It was in another city, 300 miles away. And my mother didn't even know I'd applied. When I saw the acceptance letter, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself, really proud. And then, in the same breath, the fear hit me. How was I going to tell her? That evening, she was sitting in the living room, sorting through bills. The TV was on, but the volume was low. I stood there, holding the printed letter in my hands, crumpled and damp from my palms. Mom, I started. She looked up, distracted. Yes, I swallowed hard. I got accepted to the Northvale School of Arts. She blinked. What? I repeated it, slower this time, softer, like saying it gently would make it easier to hear. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she laughed, not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but disbelief. You applied? Without telling me, I nodded. It was just a chance, Mom. I didn't think I'd get in, and if you had told me. She snapped, I would have said no. I felt my chest tighten. There it was, the wall between us again. She didn't even ask why I wanted it. She just saw it as betrayal. Do you know how much I've done for you? She shouted. All those nights I stayed up helping. You study all those sacrifices, and you want to throw it all away for painting. I said, it's not just painting. It's who I am. And she said, who you are. I raised you. Everything you are is because of me. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I shouted back, louder than I ever had in my life. No, it's in spite of you. Her face went pale. Her hands trembled. For a second, I thought she was going to slap me, but she didn't. She just whispered, "Get out." Before I say something I can't take back, I remember my throat closing, my heart pounding so fast I could barely stand. And still, I turned and left. I spent the night at Mia's place. The city lights outside her window felt strange, beautiful, but unfamiliar. She made tea, asked what happened. I told her everything, every word, every look. She said, "You'll be okay." But I wasn't, because deep down I knew this wasn't just a fight, it was a fracture that would never heal. The next morning I went back home quietly, just to pack. I thought maybe she'd calm down overnight. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe I would too, but when I opened the door, she was waiting. She didn't yell. Her eyes were red, her face tired, but her voice was calm. Too calm. "So you really want to leave?" she said. I nodded. She took a deep breath. And then she said it. The words that would echo in my head for years after. "If you walk out that door, Elena, you're not my daughter anymore." I froze. I thought she was bluffing, trying to scare me. But then she turned away, went to her room, and closed the door. No tears, no shouting, just finality. I stood there, suitcase in hand, staring at that door. Half of me wanted to drop everything and run to her. The other half, the one that had been suffocating for years, whispered, "Go." And I did. As I walked down the driveway, the wind was cold enough to sting. The neighborhood looked exactly the same, but everything felt different, smaller somehow. I kept waiting for her to call my name, to tell me to come back. But she never did. That was the last time I saw my home the way it used to be. The last time I saw my mother as just my mom, before she became a ghost in every memory I carried. I got on the bus to Northvale that evening. And as the city disappeared, behind me, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I had gotten what I wanted, but I'd lost the only person I wanted to tell. When the bus finally stopped at Northvale Station, it was midnight. I stepped out with one suitcase and a heart that felt heavier than it should have. The city lights looked like stars that had fallen to the ground. Too many, too bright, too far from home. I told myself this was freedom. But the truth? Freedom feels a lot like loneliness when you have no one waiting for you. The first few weeks were chaos. New apartment, new classes, new people. Everyone seemed excited, full of hope, talking about dreams and futures. And I just smiled along, pretending I wasn't still replaying my mom's voice in my head. "You're not my daughter anymore." It didn't sound like anger anymore. It sounded like a curse I couldn't escape. My roommate, Jenna, was kind. She laughed easily, talked about her family back home. Every time she FaceTimed her mom, I'd quietly leave the room, because hearing that warmth from someone else's mother hurt more than silence ever could. Mornings became my armor: coffee, classes, studio, library, sleep, repeat. The busier I stayed, the less I had to think. But sometimes, in the middle of painting, I'd stop and realize every stroke I made looked like something she would have hated. Messy, unplanned, too emotional. And still, I couldn't stop. Isn't that ironic? Even after walking away, I was still painting for her. Or maybe against her. I tried to write to her. I really did. I'd start a letter almost every night. "Hey, Mom, I got into my first exhibition." Or, "I made a friend who reminds me of you." But by the second line, the words would fall apart. I'd tear the page, throw it away, and whisper. She wouldn't read it anyway. I checked my phone too, way more than I'd like to admit. Every buzz made my heart race. But it was never her. Not even a single text. That silence, it wasn't empty. It was full of things we never said. Sometimes I wondered if I was the villain in her story. If she sat alone at the kitchen table, telling herself she'd done the right thing, that pushing me away would teach me something. And maybe she was right. Maybe I needed to know how it feels to stand alone. But God, did it have to hurt this much? At night, I dream of her. Not the angry version, the one who brushed my hair before school, who hummed old songs while cooking, who used to say, "You'll understand when you're older." I guess this was older. And I finally understood, just not in the way either of us hoped. Then, one day, my painting got chosen for a local art show. I remember standing there, staring at it under the gallery lights, surrounded by strangers who called it raw and beautiful. And all I could think was, I wish she could see this. Not to prove her wrong. Just to show her that her daughter was okay. that I was trying. But that's the thing about exile. It doesn't end just because the world accepts you. It ends only when the person you left behind decides to let you back in. One night, I got sick, really sick. Fever, chills, alone in my apartment. I lay on the floor, shivering, staring at my phone. My fingers hovered over her number. I could have called. I wanted to, but I didn't, because I didn't know what she'd say if she picked up. Or worse, if she didn't. I cried that night. Not because of the fever, but because I realized something terrible. The longer you stay away from home, the harder it is to remember what home felt like. Time moved on. I finished my first semester, got better grades than I expected, made new friends who didn't know the version of me that came from her shadow. And still, every time I saw a woman in the crowd who looked like her, I'd stop. My breath would catch. My heart would whisper, maybe, but it was never her. She was gone and I was learning to live with that. They say time heals. Maybe it does. But some wounds don't close. They just become part of who you are. My exile wasn't just from her house, it was from the version of myself that still needed her approval. And I think that was the hardest part. Learning that love doesn't always mean belonging. The world outside wasn't as kind as I imagined it. But it wasn't cruel either. It was just indifferent. Like it had been waiting all along for me to stop being someone's daughter and start being someone on my own. My first few months at Northvale were a blur of noise and silence. People talking, laughing, chasing dreams, and me quietly watching, learning how to exist without her voice guiding me. Or haunting me. Northvale was loud. Cars honking, strangers talking too fast, music leaking out of every open cafe door. It made me realize how small my world used to be, just that house, that kitchen, her expectations. Now I was surrounded by thousands of people, and somehow I'd never felt lonelier. There's a strange kind of freedom in being invisible. No one cares if you eat dinner alone or if you walk in the rain without an umbrella. No one calls to ask if you got home safe. That kind of silence. It's both a blessing and a punishment. I met people, of course. Classmates who talked about art like it was oxygen. A professor who told me, your pain has texture, use it. And I did. Every piece I made carried a part of her, a gesture, a phrase, a shadow on a wall that looked too much like home. Sometimes when I painted late at night, I'd catch myself whispering out loud, you'd hate this one, Mom, and I'd laugh. Because even when I tried to escape her, she was still everywhere. In my brushstrokes, in my silence. That's the thing about love, it doesn't disappear just because you ran from it. It hides in everything you do. There was a small art festival in the city square one weekend. Everyone in my class went excited and loud. I stood there surrounded by color, canvases, lights, music, laughter. But in the middle of all that noise, I felt something break again. I saw a mother and daughter sitting together, eating ice cream. The mother had her arm around her daughter's shoulder. Just an ordinary moment. But it hit me like a wave. I had to walk away. I ducked into a side street, tears blurring the neon lights. And I realized I had built an entire new life, but the emptiness I left behind had followed me here. So I went back to my apartment, picked up my phone, and typed her number. My thumb hovered over the call button for almost a full minute. But I couldn't press it, because I didn't know what I'd say. Hi, Mom, it's me. After everything? No, I just put the phone down and cried. Over time, something started to change. The pain didn't fade exactly. It just became quieter. Like background noise I learned to live with. I started to find joy in small things again. A cup of coffee that didn't taste bitter. A walk by the river after class. A sunset that made me feel okay. I started to realize that maybe healing isn't about forgetting someone. Maybe it's about forgiving them for not being what you needed and forgiving yourself for needing them anyway. One evening, I was working on a piece for a local gallery. It was supposed to be about identity, who we are when no one's looking. Without meaning to, I painted a woman's figure, her face turned away, her hands reaching out toward something she couldn't touch. When it was done, I stood back and stared at it for a long time. It was her, my mother. Not as I remembered her, strict and sharp, but softer, almost sad. Like she'd been trying to hold on to me and I just hadn't seen it. I didn't plan it. It just happened. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I looked at her face. I felt love. The quiet, aching kind, the one that survives even when everything else is gone. That night, I fell asleep with the painting beside me. And for the first time since I'd left home, I dreamed of her voice. Not shouting, not disappointed, just calling my name the way she used to when dinner was ready. I woke up crying. But it wasn't sadness this time. It was something else. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe hope. Because I realized no matter how far you run, a mother's love never really leaves you. It waits, quietly, somewhere between memory and forgiveness. It's strange, isn't it? How you can be miles away from someone, years away even, and still feel them in the air you breathe. By the time a year had passed, I had learned to live without her voice. Or at least I thought I had. Life at Northvale was steady now. Classes, part-time work, new faces, new habits. From the outside, I looked fine. Inside, I was still writing conversations with a ghost. It started on a Sunday morning. I was walking to the grocery store, coffee in one hand, music in my ears, when I smelled something, cinnamon and apples. I stopped. That scent hit me so hard it felt like a hand on my shoulder. It was her pie. The one she used to bake every winter. I hadn't smelled it in years. For a second, I was 12 again, standing in our kitchen, watching her hum softly while the oven door fogged up. I didn't even make it to the store. I walked back home, sat by the window, and cried for an hour straight. It wasn't the smell that broke me. It was the realization that I still missed her like it was yesterday. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened her contact on my phone. Mom, just 3 letters sitting there like a locked door. I stared at it for a long time. I typed, "Hey, how are you?" Then deleted it. Typed again, "I miss you." Deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "I got into another exhibition. Thought you'd want to know." My finger hovered over the send button. My heart was pounding like I was about to jump off a cliff. And then I didn't send it. I just locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. Silence, long pause, slow breathing. Sometimes, not saying something feels safer than saying it and getting nothing back. That night, I dreamed of her again. We were in our old kitchen, the radio playing softly, and she was making that same apple cinnamon pie. She looked younger, her hair tied up, humming that same old tune she loved. I walked up behind her and said, "Mom." She turned around and smiled. That warm, tired, real smile I hadn't seen in years. And then she said, "You came back late." Not angry. Not sad. Just those words, like we'd never fought, like everything was still the way it used to be. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. I couldn't tell if it was a dream or a memory pretending to be one. A few weeks later, during a campus exhibition, one of the judges came up to me. She looked at my painting, a woman standing at a window. Half in light, half in shadow. And she said, "This one feels personal. Who is she?" I smiled, but my throat closed up. I wanted to say my mother, but I just said, "Someone I used to know." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation we'd never had. Every moment I wished I'd handled differently. Regret is funny. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Quietly, constantly, until you can't ignore it anymore. A few days later, I found myself doing something strange. I bought a small notebook and started writing to her. Not texting. Not calling. Writing. "Hey, Mom," I wrote. "I made your pie today. It didn't taste like yours, but I tried." Then another entry. "I saw a woman at the market today. She had your hair." I almost said hi. Day after day, I filled those pages. Small confessions, quiet apologies, things I could never say out loud. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about staying connected, even if she'd never read a single word. Sometimes love doesn't end. It just changes its shape. From daily calls to quiet prayers, from words to silence, from presence to memory. And maybe that's what the echoes of home really are. Not ghosts that haunt you, but memories that refuse to let you forget where you came from. Because no matter how far I went, I was still her daughter. even if she didn't say it, even if I couldn't hear it. It's strange how you can live a whole new life, meet new people, build new memories, and still, one name, one voice can pull you right back to where it all started. That's what happened to me. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a big sign or some cosmic signal. It was just an evening, cold, quiet, and my heart suddenly whispered, "It's time." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew who it meant. For days I'd been dreaming of her, not the angry version, not the one from that night. Just her, sitting by the window, stirring her tea like she always did, waiting for something she'd never say out loud. That image haunted me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I sat down, opened my laptop, and wrote an email. Not a letter, not a message on my phone, an email. Because somehow that felt safer, less personal, like a whisper instead of a confession. "Hi, Mom," I typed. "I hope you're doing okay." I stared at those words for a long time. They looked small. Too small for everything I wanted to say. I wanted to write, "I miss you. I'm sorry. I still dream of home." But instead, I kept it simple. I got another painting accepted for an exhibition. It's called Mother's Hands. I hesitated before clicking send. My finger trembled. I thought about every possible reaction: anger, silence, or worse, indifference. But I clicked it anyway. And then, nothing. Hours passed. Then days. Then a week. No reply. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, but it was never her. Just ads, reminders, random emails from people I didn't care about. I told myself it was fine. That maybe she never saw it. Maybe her address had changed. Maybe she just wasn't ready, but deep down I knew she'd seen it. And her silence hurt more than her words ever did. A few nights later, I was walking home from the studio, rain falling softly, when my phone lit up. One new message. The sender's name stopped me in my tracks. Mom. I stood there, in the middle of the street, too afraid to open it. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. When I finally opened it, it wasn't long. Just a few words. "I saw your painting online. You've gotten better. Take care of yourself." That was it. No greeting. No question. Just that. But those words, "You've gotten better," they broke me. Because I could hear what she didn't say. "I'm proud of you. I've been watching from afar." I never stopped caring. I went home and cried for a long time. Not the loud kind of crying, the quiet kind. The kind that feels like your heart finally letting go of years of hurt. I didn't reply that night. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's been both your comfort and your wound? The next morning, I opened her message again. Read it over and over. Then I wrote back, "Thanks, Mom. That means more than you think." I hovered over the send button again, just like before. But this time it felt different. Not fear, not regret. Just peace. I hit send. For a few days, we wrote small messages, weather, health, things that didn't really matter, but somehow meant everything. It felt like walking on thin ice, careful, slow, every word tested before it touched the surface. She never mentioned the past. Neither did I, but between those lines, something had changed. The distance was still there, but it didn't feel permanent anymore. It felt like a bridge was quietly being rebuilt, one word, one message at a time. One evening she wrote, "The garden's a mess without you." And I laughed, because that was her way of saying, "I miss you." I replied, "Then I guess I'll have to come fix it someday." She didn't answer right away. But when she did, it was just one word. Someday. That was enough. For the first time in years, I went to bed smiling. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had begun again. I realized something that night. Sometimes, reconciliation isn't a single moment. It's a quiet series of small choices to reach out, to listen, to try again. Maybe love isn't loud. Maybe it doesn't need grand apologies or perfect timing. Maybe it's just that a simple email, a single word, a fragile thread that still connects two hearts after everything else has fallen apart. And for the first time, the word home didn't sound like a place I'd lost. It sounded like something I could still go back to. Time changes everything. Not all at once. Not suddenly. But slowly, like sunlight melting frost off a window pane. It had been almost 2 years since I left home. 2 years since those words that split my world in half. And yet I could still hear them. You're not my daughter anymore. They used to sound like punishment. Now they sounded like a cry for help. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. I was painting when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. When I did, the voice on the other end made my heart stop. Elena? It was Mrs. Torres, our old neighbor from back home. She said, "Your mom's been sick. Nothing too serious, but she asks about you." I didn't even realize I was crying until I heard myself whisper, "She asks about me." Mrs. Torres sighed. Every time I see her, she won't say it out loud, but she misses you. Honey, I hung up and just sat there, holding the phone like it might shatter. All the walls I'd built, all the anger I'd carried, they started to crumble. Because suddenly the truth hit me. She hadn't stopped loving me. She had just loved me the only way she knew how, through fear. When she said, "You're not my daughter anymore," I used to think she meant, "I don't love you." But maybe she meant, "I don't know how to love this new version of you yet." Maybe it was her way of saying, "The daughter I raised, the one who listened, who stayed, she's gone. And I don't know who this woman is, and maybe that scared her." We expect our parents to understand us completely. But sometimes they're just scared that they're losing the one person they built their life around. Scared that we'll stop needing them. Scared that they failed. And I think that's what she meant that night. Not rejection. Just fear wearing the mask of anger. That evening, I went back to my studio. I stared at the painting of her, the one I'd done months ago, with her face turned away. This time I picked up my brush again. I added something new, her hand reaching toward the light. For the first time, I didn't paint her as someone who hurt me. I painted her as someone who was hurting too. Because the truth is, we both broke that night. I just had the freedom to leave. She had to stay behind and live with the silence. When I finished, I looked at her face and whispered, "I get it now, Mom. You were never trying to destroy me. You were trying to protect me, even from myself." Later that night, I opened my notebook again, the one where I wrote to her. But this time, I didn't write as a daughter begging to be seen. I wrote as someone finally ready to see her. "Dear Mom, you were right about so many things. The world is hard. It takes more than talent to survive it. But you were wrong about one thing. You didn't lose your daughter. You just lost the version of her that was afraid to live. I'm stronger now. Because of you. Because of the way you pushed, even when it hurt. I understand now. Love doesn't always sound like kindness. Sometimes it sounds like survival. I didn't send it. I just folded the page and tucked it inside the painting frame. Some words don't need to travel far to reach where they're meant to go. The next morning I went outside early. The city was waking up, birds, traffic, the hum of life. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. I didn't call her that day. I didn't go back home. But I forgave her, and maybe, in some way, she forgave me too. People talk about closure like it's a door you close behind you. But sometimes it's a window you open. You don't walk away, you just let the light in. For years, I thought that sentence, "You're not my daughter anymore," was the end of us. But maybe it was just her way of saying, "You're not the same little girl I raised. You've grown up. And I don't know how to love you like this yet. And that's okay. Because now I do." Love doesn't always sound like what we want to hear. Sometimes it breaks us first, just so it can rebuild us stronger. It had been 3 years. 3 winters, 3 birthdays, 3 summers that came and went without her voice. I thought I had moved on. I thought time had done its job. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking. That morning I woke up with a strange feeling, like something was calling me. Not a voice, not a dream. Just a pull. Before I could overthink it, I packed a small bag and took the first train home. The ride felt endless. The same landscapes I once escaped from now looked softer, older. I stared out the window, watching the world blur past, tiny towns, sleeping fields, rusted billboards. My reflection looked different too. Older, calmer. But behind my eyes, the same girl still waited, the one who left with a suitcase and a breaking heart. When I stepped off the train, the air smelled like childhood, wet soil, jasmine, rain on concrete. I hadn't realized how much I missed it. Every step toward that old neighborhood felt like walking through time. Her house looked smaller than I remembered. The blue paint had faded. The garden was wild, flowers growing without rules, something she would have hated. But I smiled. It was still home. I stood at the gate for a long time, unsure whether to knock or turn back. And then the door opened. She was standing there. My mother. Her hair was grayer now. She looked thinner, tired. But her eyes, those same eyes, still carried every piece of me I thought I'd lost. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "You came back." Just like that. No anger, no blame. I nodded, and suddenly I was crying, harder than I had in years. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where everything had ended. The walls still had the same old photos, the same chipped mug on the counter. She poured tea like nothing had happened, but her hands were shaking. I said, "I didn't think you'd want to see me." She smiled faintly and said, "I didn't think you'd ever come back." We laughed, softly, brokenly. Then came silence, but this time it wasn't painful. It was full, like words finally had space to breathe. She looked at me and said, "I never stopped being your mother. I just didn't know how to be the mother you needed then." And I said, "And I didn't know how to love you without fighting you first." That was it. No grand speeches. Just truth, quiet, imperfect, human. She brought out a photo album I hadn't seen since I was a kid. We went through it together, birthdays, school plays, messy holidays. Each picture was a tiny forgiveness. A reminder that before the shouting and silence, there had been love, fierce, flawed, but real. At one point, she touched my hand and said, "You're so much like me." "Elena, that's why we fought so much." And I laughed through my tears, because it was true. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The evening light poured through the hallway, soft and golden, like mercy. I turned to her and said, "Mom, I love you." She smiled, a small trembling smile, and whispered, "I know." I always did. We didn't hug right away. We just stood there, eyes meeting after all those lost years. And then she stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me, and the world went quiet. That was our goodbye. Not the kind that ends something, the kind that finally lets something begin again. When I got back to the train station that night, I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt whole. Like every version of me, the daughter who left, the woman who survived, the child who loved too much had finally found each other again. I looked out the window as the train moved. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was just going forward. People always think closure means forgetting the pain. But it doesn't. It means learning to carry it gently, like a scar that doesn't hurt anymore. Just reminds you of where you've been. She once said, "You're not my daughter anymore," but maybe what she really meant was, "You're no longer the little girl I raised. You've become your own person." And now, after everything, I can finally say she's still my mother. Always was. Always will be. And that is how I found my way home.